Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin wa ashabihi al-muntajabin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I thought we would talk a little bit in the next few sessions on the devotional practices instituted by the Islamic Sharia and think through them and over them and try and find the more esoteric meanings of these practices and see how also they prepare us for the reception of God, the ultimate journey that we must conduct from ourselves to Allah, how these religious ceremonies and practices assist us. So the first thing, obviously, that the Prophet has said is that Salah is the pillar of faith. If Salah is accepted, then everything else will be questioned and accepted. If Salah is rejected, then there'll be no questioning of any other deed. They'll be flatly rejected. Now, for the Prophet to make such a huge statement, it must mean something. If Salah means just prayer, then it might not make much sense, because why does God require prayers? Then again, there's ambiguity as to what do we mean by prayer. Does it mean asking God? Does it mean a show of obedience and devotion to God, as in worship? When put together, we will say, well, prayers do not make sense given that God is needless of us praying to Him or worshiping Him. So prayers must have a deeper understanding that we need to explore. If we can move away from Salah slightly and look at the hadith of the Prophet in relation to prayers, in the sense of asking from God, we might find a bit more clarity. The Blessed Prophet said that even when you pick up your staff in the morning to go to work, basically was talking about a farmer going to tend to his flock. He said, ask God to assist you in picking up your staff. Now the question comes here, why? If I were not to ask God, would I not have the ability to pick up my staff? Of course I would. And if I were to ask God and the next breath was not destined for me, would I have the ability to pick up the staff? Of course not. So what difference does this prayer of asking God to assist in picking up the staff make? When we analyze it very carefully and we resort to other traditions of the Blessed Prophet in which he has said that prayers are the essence of devotion, we begin to understand that actually the whole act of asking God, or the whole act of the prescribed namaz or salah and devotion and worship, are means of connecting with God, to bring God to mind, to become mindful of God. And prayers, therefore, are all about connecting with God. So salah means to pray. But if you were to remove the wow from the end and put it in the front, it becomes wasl, to connect with God. So devotional acts of Islam are like prayers, connecting with God. And of that, the biggest connection that we can establish with God is in the form of salah, in the form of devoting ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is something we need to explore properly. But as a prelude for salah, we have the ritual ablutions. Now here we must understand the hadith of the Prophet in which he states that if a person has a spring of water running outside his house And if he were to wash himself 5 times within that running stream, is there a possibility of dirt and filth accumulating upon the body of that person? So the Prophet is talking to an Arab audience who are inside a desert environment, who tend to get dirty, not only with the dust and the sand, but obviously they are dealing with animals. They are slaughtering animals. They are cooking. So they get covered in blood. At times, obviously, nature calls and water is scarce. So when this example is given to them, it makes a lot of sense to them that yes, if there's a stream of water running outside the house, and if we were to clean ourselves 5 times a day, physical dirt would not amass upon our bodies. Now, through that, the Blessed Prophet was trying to convey that in the same way, if you were to perform ritual ablutions 5 times a day, your souls will not remain tarnished. So immediately we see that there's a connection between the physical act and the psychological state of being. Analyzed carefully, we will see that the ceremony and the rituals of ablutions and washing are not novel introductions of Islam. They have existed prior to Islam within Judaism. After Judaism within Christianity, the churches, some of them have taps outside. The reason for this, we are told, is that Jesus used to perform, may Allah bless him, used to perform ablutions by washing his hands and his face before devoting himself to God. Now, that's a tradition that has been carried on from before Christianity. Hinduism has similar traditions. So we see, no, these traditions have been inspired to humankind by God from the very outset of humanity upon the face of this earth. Now, if it only has a symbolic value and it's supposed to prepare the mind to engage within devotion, then why give it such precision of washing the face, rinsing the mouth, the nose, washing the face, the arms, then doing the massa of the head and then massa of the feet or washing the feet? Why have these specific rituals? From here we can see, no, that there has to be some existential property in the sequence that the Quran gives and the physical limbs that the Quran suggests we wash. As for what is the physical benefit of washing these limbs, our scientific mind has not reached there yet. But we need to bear in mind that it is important, and that's why the Quran has suggested it. The reason why I'm saying that is, least we just say, well, wudu is just sprinkling water on the face and on the arms. No, do it in the way that has been prescribed. Otherwise, it may not have been prescribed in that particular fashion. Now, why is wudu necessary before Salah? One is that obviously it has physical properties, but the other one is it's a stage that prepares us for the meeting of the Lord. Now, about Imam Hassan, we are told that whenever he would approach water for ablution, he would begin to tremble in the awe of God. Now, surely an imam should be of a stature that they are always mindful of God and in the presence of God. Why would he, therefore, tremble only when he approaches water for ablution? It shows that we as human beings, in order to conduct normal human lives, we have to somewhat suspend the emphatic presence of God. Because if the emphatic presence of God were always at the forefront of our mind, we would not be able to function properly or accurately. So what happens is that we have moments in which we invite the presence of God most emphatically. And that then continues throughout the day. Like the Blessed Prophet used to say, Salamullah alayhi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that my heart becomes rusty through the engagement with the world. And therefore, at nights, I perform istighfar to cleanse the dust and the rust from the slate of my soul. It is our humanness that brings these states upon us. When we approach the water, we are told to pause and to acquire a different state or a different demeanor. One of the things that we do, this is very wrong, is that we tend to overthink spirituality. We tend to force a spiritual state upon ourselves. That's not anything to do with spirituality. That is actually counterproductive. It's like many people in my days when I used to go to Hajj would say, I'm struggling to connect with the Kaaba. All the others were in tears and crying and weeping, but nothing happened to me. The problem is when we try too hard to feel in a certain way, that feeling evades us. It actually draws away from us because we're trying to enforce it. The secret in acquiring a spiritual state is not to try and impose it. And as we will see through the ritual of Wudhu, it's all about coming to a state of calm within ourselves, not overthinking, not forcing a state upon our souls. So the first thing we are told is be calm. Gently, when you cup the water in your hand, look at it, consider it as a living being, and say, Oh Allah, I thank you for creating this substance, which not only nourishes my body and gives me life, but it purifies me. Talk to God and then thank the water. Obviously, I'm adding this. Thank the water for its purification, for its property of purifying. Thank the water and say, oh Allah, make this water a source of purification for me, not only for my body, but for my soul and my mind. Then take the water and rinse the mouth. When we rinse the mouth, the whole sentiment there is that the mouth is getting purified, not only physically, but from anything that is unbefitting. And as it becomes purified from anything that is unbefitting, it is going to become purified through things that are befitting. And the sentiment ought to be, O Lord, remove not only that which is displeasing to you from the words that I utter, but bring to my tongue things that are pleasing to you. When we do that, we are then reminded of not only praising God, not only thanking Him, but to use our words appropriately to bring goodness to the creatures of God, to resist from the temptation of causing harm to others. Now, sometimes in the absence of people, we tend to talk about them. When we do wudu and the mouth is being purified, that act of talking about somebody in their absence is seen as a filthy act. Because when we talk about somebody in their absence, they may not hear the voice, but the sentiments that are carried within the voice and within the sounds and within the thoughts are already emitted within the world. Those sentiments are going to strike at their minds and at their hearts, and they're going to affect them subconsciously and more advertently. What we recite in Surah Falak, min sharri hasid idha hasad, from the evil of the envious when they envy. Now, the envy can translate into an act, detrimental act directed to somebody else, or envy can stay within the heart and the feeling of envy is released. And that feeling of envy does as much harm as a bad word or a physical strike. So when we wash our mouths, we are purifying the mouth. Then we rinse our nose. And as we do so, we invite the fragrance of God to be smelled by us, not only in paradise, but the fragrance of the presence of God in our worldly lives. In any case, through this exercise, the mind becomes prepared. Then we take water and we wash our faces. This religious sentiment here is, O Lord, brighten my face on a day in which the faces shall appear dull and lifeless and lightless. But obviously, we are not trying to impose that imagery in our minds. What we are trying to do here is a very natural act of applying the water and imagining the light emitting from our faces. Because the brightening of the face has to be now, not on that day, as the Prophet explained. That day is veiled from us and we live in that day. It's because our perception is not accurate. Then when we wash our arms, the religious sentiment is that, O Lord, hand me the book of my deeds within my right hand. Do not give it to me in my left hand. Do not tie my hands to my neck, and do not tie my hands behind my back. So when we are washing our arms, we are freeing our arms of chains. These are the sentiments, religious sentiments. And we are holding the book of our deeds in our right hand, and our hands are shining with the light of God. When we wipe our heads, the religious sentiment is, O Lord, cover me with your mercy on a day in which I will be in dire need of your grace and your mercy. So when we are wiping it, it's not only a thought, we're actually inviting the mercy of God upon our heads, and his light and kindness is surrounding us. And then when we wipe our feet or wash our feet, the religious sentiment is, O Lord, keep my feet stable upon the sirat as I cross over it on a day when people shall appear slipping from it and falling. When we say this, we are actually stabilizing our feet upon the right course at this present moment. Now, when this is done 4 or 5 times a day, even if the Prophet has said, a person who does wudhu, in spite of being in the state of tahara, is inviting light upon light. It does not mean the physical light, it means the psychological light, the light within the soul, because these meanings are being reinforced. Now I know people have a tendency of letting their taps go and water is being wasted, but once the godly sentiments begin to prevail, the mind will not allow for wastage of water, will only take drops of water and do wudhu. And wudhu can be done with a quarter of a glass of water. So they will become economical. They will become more godly in their performances. So at least anybody worries that if I were to do 5 wudhu, I'll be wasting a lot of water. No. You will become economical and God himself will inspire the soul. So the whole act of wudhu is not only for us to acquire spiritual state, but it is to prepare us for the next ibadah, which requires a state of mind freed from the world. So the main thing that the wudhu is doing is we are cleansing ourselves from other than Allah as we approach Allah, so that we can approach Allah without being tarnished in the mind with the world, its pursuits, its concerns, and what anybody is saying. I'm going to stop there, and inshallah next week we'll continue with Salah.